Okay, so welcome on the next session from our Cybersecurity Architect course. This is the preparation course for the Microsoft certification in cybersecurity topic. And today we will talk about design and security operation strategy. And later, after some few slides, I will show you the demo how to configure some I think interesting services in Azure Cloud. Okay, so let's start. The main topics for today's session is first, let's talk what is the security operations. Later, we will talk a little about tools, for example, Microsoft Defender or Azure Sentinel. And after, when we go through those tools, we go to the 3 steps how to design a secure operation strategy, the most quickest way how we can implement this. Later, I will show you the demo, and after that we can start a talk and quick Q&A session. Of course, if you have any questions during this presentation, please raise the hand. And Agnieszka, you need to monitor our boards because I don't see the teams currently.
I will be monitoring it.
So you need to put some pressure on me if anyone asks a question, okay?
Sure.
Okay. So first of all, what is the security operations? Security operation is, from DevSecOps perspective, some monitoring of an enterprise environment to identify, diagnose, and remedy risk from the attacks which occur in our enterprise environment. Of course, not only enterprise environment, because as Agnieszka presented on the previous session, it could be also non-profit organizations which will be hit by some attackers, or maybe some governance, for example. And from my perspective, the SecOps rule is the most critical is to, first of all, is to ignore some logs from various services in Azure Cloud or maybe in the other clouds like AWS or GCP. And of course, this guy or girl should also ignore some logs from for example, from on-premises environments. The next step is the implementation of some kind of alerting and investigation on those ignited logs. And after that, we can do some analysis, more deeper analysis, or maybe we can automate some operations to have, for example, to block not authorized users for the operations in our infrastructure. And Microsoft provides some nice slide for the security operations, where on top we have the Microsoft Sentinel as the COR tool, so security orchestration, automation, and remediation. And of course, the Microsoft Sentinel works also as security identity, incident, event management tool, where we can ignore our logs, implement alerting, and do some analysis on this using, for example, machine learning. Later, we have also some helpful tools like Defender, some Defender services, let's call them like that. And one of them is the Defender for Cloud, and second is the suite of services, Microsoft 365 Defender. Of course, when we have the Microsoft Sentinel, we also can have the possibility to ignore the logs from the on-premises, or maybe some dedicated solutions for the, for example, like firewalls from Symantec or other providers. Of course, we have also some security operations model and tools. And on the bottom, we should, for example, think how we can automate investigation and remediation of well-known attacks. And in this step, we have help from tools like Microsoft 365 Defender and Microsoft Defender for Cloud, which they using for some kind of policies. They identify what is the bottlenecks of our infrastructure, what could be improved in this infrastructure, or how we should configure something to avoid such kind of attacks. The next tier is the remediation and escalation. And in this step, the SecOps operator should implement some kind of alerting to have information about what happened in our infrastructure and do some analysis on this. On the next tier, when we have the more information what occurs in our infrastructure, we can start advanced analysis. For example, some deep analysis of the incidents. And the next, not the top tier, is the hunting. So we can use, for example, tools like Microsoft Sentinel, Azure Sentinel to hunt and the incident and investigate more deeply what happens under the hood. Okay. And as I mentioned, we have three set of tools which helps us in this investigation and our security operations. One is the Azure Sentinel, Azure Defender, and Security Center is the top level. So the most interesting, because we are talking about Azure Cloud, is Microsoft Defender for Cloud. And this is the tool which provides, using Azure policy, identify our problems in infrastructure, for example, with Azure, with configuration in Azure AD, or some incidents which can occur in the Azure AD or other services in the Azure. We can also have the possibility, for example, in the Azure Defender to monitor multi-cloud environments like AWS or GCP. I will show you later on the demo how we can implement this. The next tool, which is more and more, I think, interesting, and more organizations have this problem, is Microsoft Defender for IoT devices. So let's assume we have a scenario that our enterprise have some automated warehouse service, and we need to monitor our devices which help, for example, with our packages about any security threats they occur in those devices, or maybe some, for example, the devices require some bug fixing or some updates. We can also use the Microsoft Defender for IoT to look into that. Currently, the status of Microsoft Defender for IoT is up in the preview version, but I think it's also can be used in the production already. The next step is Microsoft 365 Defender. Many organizations, especially enterprise organizations, use Office 365 in the offices, for example, by personnel. And on top of this, we can implement Microsoft 365 Defender to investigate and identify any breach or some malicious incidents provided by our personnel, or maybe they open some email, for example. And we can also, because the Microsoft 365 is the suite of services, we can, for example, block our personal computer. If we see that they have, for example, malicious email in the inbox, and during the cleanup process, this computer will be blocked in our infrastructure. And on top of this, we have the Azure Sentinel, which I say is the SIEM and SOAR tool solution in our infrastructure, which help us with the identification of the malicious activities in our logs using machine learning and other advanced techniques, because Microsoft invest into this tool a few years of work, and of course Microsoft have one of the biggest cloud security team, I think, which have also put some knowledge into Azure Sentinel. And we can, using Azure Sentinel, for example, implement alerting or automation mechanism on top of our logs, ignited logs. We can proactively hunting some incidents, and we can also implement some kind of responses for those incidents. Okay, and the 3 steps to design these security operations. The first step is the log ignition. So it means that we need ignite logs from our services, from the cloud, from Azure cloud, from multi-cloud environments or on-premises environments to one central place to later to analyze those logs for any malicious activities. Azure Sentinel is the tool which have many connectors. For example, it can be easily connected to Microsoft Defender for Cloud or Microsoft 365 Defender. But of course, it can be also connected to the AWS cloud and use some information from AWS directly from AWS or GCP. But Azure Sentinel also have the open standard for the log ignition, so we can implement, if we have any tools that need send some kind of logs, we can also connect to the Azure Sentinel to have this information in one single place. One more interesting thing about Azure Sentinel, the Azure Sentinel is built on top of the Azure Analytics workspaces. So we can, for example, implement custom workspaces also on top of those logs and use the custom query language to analyze what we ignite in our logs. The next step is to implementation of the alerting. It means that when we ignite logs, the most common problem with the ignition is to ignite too many informations. But we need to, during the analysis, initial analysis, we need to implement some kind of alerting, which alert us about some malicious info and suspicious operations ongoing in the system. And in this, also Azure Sentinel helps us. And the last step is the investigation, where the must investigate possible threat reported by alerting, or, for example, when we investigate something in the workspace during our analytical operations. Okay, so not demo time, but we can come to this little later. First of all, let's go a few steps back and let's talk a little more about Microsoft Defender for Cloud. this tool can help us. It can help us, for example, in the continuous assets, our services. This also provides for us, for example, the secure score of our services. So we have the more information how our infrastructure or our subscriptions behave according to the policies defined in the Azure Microsoft Defender for cloud. We can also have the possibility to implement some custom policies for this. The next tool is the Microsoft Defender for EOT. But let's skip this because this is not a preview. And I think the most services which we have is in the Microsoft 365 Defender. We have the Defender for the endpoints. This is the service which help us with the, let's say, defend and monitor our devices which we have connected to our enterprise environment. So as I say, for example, some computers of our personnel. The next step is the Microsoft Defender for Office 365, where you can identify any issues with the infected mailboxes or other services. We have also Microsoft Defender for Identity, which help us with the identification of any malicious situations with our identity in our Azure AD. And we have Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps, when we can monitor cloud applications which are defined in our Azure AD. Okay, so I think this is a short introduction about topics, but let's go and deep dive into the Azure portal. And let's start from the top level. So I will show you Secure Center, where we have this is the global level when we can identify and start our work with security in the Azure cloud. We can, for example, configure quickly conditional access to our Azure AD. For our users, the next step is the identity protection, where we can define some configurations, how to protect our identity using many, for example, sign-in risk policy, for example, we can define. And of course, we have the Security Center, which show us the information from if they load. I see this loading still, which show us the information about recommendations for our infrastructure. Okay, so let's go to the Microsoft Defender for the cloud. Indeed, in this demo, I will prepare the infrastructure where I have 2 Azure subscriptions and I'm connect one AWS account to show you how Azure Microsoft Defender for the cloud helps us. I don't have any on-premise environment to do some demo or the EOT devices, so we only focus on the cloud. So what we have here, we have the security posture for all our subscriptions for the Azure and the AWS. And I have defined also some regulatory compliance and security benchmark, which are applied to both the Azure cloud and for the AWS. And we have some information about workload protections, where we have information about some security alerts which occur and are identified by Microsoft Defender for the cloud. But how to connect to the, because out of the box we have only Azure Cloud, but how to connect other environments like AWS or maybe some on-premises? We can go to the environment settings. And here we can add second environment, and we can connect the AWS or GCP. In my case is the AWS. And I think the AWS, maybe I will go to here and here. Okay, so on the Azure Cloud, we can set some standards. In other words, this is the Azure policies that we can connect to our infrastructure. And one more step, we can also have possibility to enable to our subscription the Defender plan, so they monitor our services for the many incidents. But in the security policy, we can, by default, we have the implemented Azure Security Benchmark policy, which monitors our infrastructure to some guidance and standards. But we can also implement some industry and regulator standards. Some of them is implemented out of the box, but we can also have the possibility to add any more standards. For example, in the New Zealand, we have some restriction about compliance. And we can also implement some custom initiatives. This is the first step in the definition of the security operations. When we define some security policy for our Azure subscription, we can also set for some kind of auto-provisioning to, for example, implement the log analytics on Azure VMs when we deploy something. Or we can, for example, define that we have in our Azure subscription, for every instance of Kubernetes cluster, we automatically connect the Defender for containers. And first step on this level in the Microsoft Defender for Cloud, we can also implement some kind of email notifications to have information about, for example, the alerts which have the high priority. And we can also do some integrations with our other services, or for example, we can implement the CI/CD vulnerability scanning, and we can connect, for example, the Azure DevOps here. We can also have the possibility to add some workflow automation to automatically respond on some events that occur in our infrastructure. And this is what we have for the Azure. On the AWS, we can define a little less plans and policies for now, because there is only some standard settings. So by default, we have the some kind of the security scan for the standards, according to the standards on which are defined for the cloud. It should be used to have the more secure configuration, but we can also implement and enable the monitoring for the EC2 instances and for the containers, especially for the Kubernetes. And by default, we have some standards defined for the AWS. If I remember, yes, there are 3 of them out of the box, but we can also add some custom assessments. So the same as we have for the Azure Cloud. But how to connect other subscriptions or accounts, not only Azure. We can go to the in the AWS. We need to define, select some kind of resource group, and the location. We need to put the AWS account. Let's see, like that. Okay. Next, go to the plan. And we can connect this to the single account or management account. So we can choose if we have only single instance of AWS, or for example, if we have the AWS organization, we can also connect the whole organization into here. The next step is to select the plan. So as I said previously, we can, out of the box, we have the security posture policy implemented, and we can also add the servers and containers to monitor. And next step is to download the CloudFormation template. We need to create this, deploy this template on the AWS. Check if our IAM and ARN rules are correctly and then the same as we have here. Review and generate, and we have working connection. The same we can do for the GCP cloud. Let's choose some resource group. Okay. Random numbers. And here we have the same. So we have the security posture management, servers, and containers. So the basic stuff which we can monitor. And later we need to deploy some script, shell script, to connect to the GCP. Okay, so this is how we can configure and connect to other cloud environments and use Microsoft Defender to monitor other clouds. But let's go back to the few steps. In the recommendations tab, we can check all recommendations for our cloud, and we have the information about security score. And this is the information about the whole of infrastructure. We can filter, for example, let's like that, for the AWS. We have, for example, information, basic unauthorized network access, and we have information that our virtual private connections have some issue. They have the default security group, and we have information from the AWS about what security groups are affected by this alert and this recommendation. What else? We have also security alerts provided by the Azure Microsoft Defender. And we have the information about affected application or database. For example, we have the potential. Hold a second. Okay, so we have, for example, alert about potential SQL brute force attempt. And we have information about what resource is affected, what happens before pre-attack, and we can go deeper to investigate much more deeper this information. And later we can take action for this. We can, for example, trigger automate response and create some logic for this. The triggers for the automatic responses are configured by logic apps and can be implemented in the logic apps. So we can, for example, send from some email, or we can create the ticket in our support system to monitor and investigate this alert much more deeper. And this is the information about the alerts which provide for us Microsoft Defender. And it is possible to also have this information from both the Azure and the AWS clouds or GCP. So we have the information about alerts in the multi-cloud environments. And let's see if the map is loaded. Because when alerts occur in Microsoft Defender and is monitored in the Microsoft Defender, we have this information also in the security alert map, so we know from which point this incident happened. But I think this not work for now. Okay, we can have also the inventory when we have the information about all resources, both from the AWS and from the Azure cloud. And we have information that some resource health and this AWS account have the problems like recommendations like this. So we know that our CrowdTrail is not enabled in all regions and is currently in the unhealthy status. So we can go deeper and we can implement can add the remediation steps, and we have the provided information about some manual operations. But we can also, for example, have the shell script for this, and we can create some automation to enable this by default. Okay, so we have a lot of information from gathered by Microsoft Defender for the cloud. And these logs can be transferred to Azure Sentinel because Microsoft Defender only monitor infrastructure and gather information according to the configured policies. And in the Microsoft Sentinel, we can, on those events and alerts, incidents, we can implement, first of all, the Microsoft Sentinel out of the box, investigate and those logs, and using machine learning, propose some operations on top of them. And we can also track much more information. Okay, so we have the Microsoft Sentinel. In the Microsoft Sentinel, to have informations about and gather logs from the different services, we have the many possible connectors. And for example, we can choose let's choose the Apache. And we can, for example, gather some logs from the Apache HTTP server or from Tomcat directly to Microsoft Sentinel to do some analysis on those logs. And the same we can do in the other options, the any. So we have the common event format, so we can connect our services to using the common event format to ignest logs to the Microsoft Sentinel. This is the first step of investigation. When we have some logs in the Sentinel, we can implement some workbooks. Currently, I have 2 workbooks for this. And This is provided by the Microsoft Sentinel community, and we can do this template and look into information, what happens in our infrastructure and what incidents and alerts are. Okay, here we are. Happens. What else? Okay, so we have the logs, and currently we need to implement some alerting on those logs. In this also, we have the analytics option in the Microsoft Sentinel. And those rules, this is the rule templates. So we can define, enable such rule, and we can define the example, we can edit also such rule. And because those is the rules implemented and used, and under the hood they use also the machine learning to the investigation. We can configure some more information. We can include some alert providers, and we can also implement by default some automated responses for this rule, especially for this rule when they occur on our logs. If this is not enough, we can also implement some automation. And let's do this quickly. Currently, I don't have any playbooks, so let's create some automation rule quickly. Okay, so let's analytical rule name contains incident based on Microsoft Defender. Okay, so let's assign the owner of the such kind of incident, and it will be me. Maybe let's broken. Okay, so let's apply. So we have the first automation. So when incident happen in the Microsoft Defender, this will be automatically linked to me. So probably this not work right now because those incidents created some time ago. Okay, so let's take the first incident. This is reported by the Microsoft Defender. And we can go deeper. So this is the after log ignition, log analytics, and some automation. This is the first step when we try to investigate what happened during this attack. So we can monitor, can go to the directly to the alert ring. But let's go to the investigation, and here is much more interesting. So when we start investigation, we have the information about this. You can, for example, go to the timeline. We have this alert, and we have the information. Okay. Probably is okay. Something is not working. Maybe do you have any questions in the meantime? Because I see that something is loading still. Maybe not now. Okay, so let's wait for, because okay, related if. Okay, so now it's working. So when we start investigation on such kind of alert, we have the information about, for example, related alerts and much more information. Let's see, maybe we find something with the virtual machines. Okay, let's see, product name, cloud. Severity. Let's take the high. Oh, maybe here something more interesting. Okay, so let's go to the details. Okay. Okay, so do some investigation. Okay, so we have the information access from the Tor exit node. Limit access to your storage accounts. Okay, and we have, maybe we have here. No, we don't have the IP address. No, this not show. No, we don't have any IP address here. Okay, so we have such alert. So we can also open the playbook. If we have something configured for this kind of alerts, the playbook will be executed by default, and we can block, for example, some and do some actions on our infrastructure. Go to the, we don't have any insights. Entities, we don't have any. Okay, so to wrap up. So basically the first step is to do some log ignition from different, let's say, services from the on-prem or multi-cloud or from the Azure. The next step is to implementation of the alerting. And the last step is the investigation on those and automation on those issues which occur during the whole process. Okay, so from my side for the demo, this is all. So maybe we can start the Q&A session.
So during the presentation, there was no questions on the chat. So if you have any questions, just please raise your hand and just ask a question to Maciej. Alexander?
Oh. Yes, I think all the Microsoft Sentinel and all companies is very expensive. Do you know in real life? Did you use it, or you know how much it costs? Because When I was seeing it was per server, I think, and it was a lot.
Yes, honestly, I don't have any implementations yet of Azure Sentinel in the production environment. But first step when you want to estimate how much it will be cost is you don't need to ignest too many logs because they are stored in the analytical workspaces, and of course they cost some money also. So you need to implement some log export settings and something like that, and this is the first step. So when you have the small amount of information, it not should be as costly as is, but when the number of logs grow, it could be getting more and more expensive. So all the time, this is the most biggest problem when you go with the security operations, because we need to think how many logs we need to analyze in the Sentinel.
Okay, thank you. The company has to have a budget for this part, I think, and this is for a bigger company, not small one.
Yes, I think the Sentinel is in the core is designed for the enterprise companies, not the companies without money.
Okay, thank you.
If I can add something to that, what Maciej said. With Sentinel, you will get lots of alerts, lots of things that you want to check, and you need to have people to check those. So usually Sentinel is introduced in companies that have proper SecOps teams.
Okay.
So like smaller companies probably won't benefit from it because of that also, that somebody needs to check these alerts.
Okay, thank you.
I think that for the smaller companies, the Microsoft Defender for cloud or Microsoft 365 Defender will be enough as a tool for some SecOps operations.